Very well. So now that we have Android Studio installed, what we're going to do is we are going to create a very simple Android app. Now, realizing that this Android app here, I don't expect you to know anything about Android Studio, nor do I expect you to know anything about developing Android applications. So at this point here, all you need to do is to follow along what I'm doing. So this is just to get us going with Android Studio. So to get our feet wet, as we say, with Android Studio. Okay, so just follow along. I also expect that you won't understand everything that we're going to go through here, which is totally fine because we'll learn all of this stuff as we go along in the course. So don't worry if things don't make sense. Just follow along and enjoy. All right, so once you open your Android Studio, depending on whether you have had other things that you've done before with Android Studio, you should see this. If not, no worries, okay? This should be empty. You won't be able to see anything there. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say start a new Android Studio project. So click here, and then we have this awesome prompt here, awesome wizard, if you will, that allows us to then choose what is it that we want to start doing, right? At the top here, we have phone or tablet, Wear OS, TV, Android Auto, Android things, and so forth. Obviously, we're going to be focusing on phone and tab. So the first tab here. And then we have different options here. So we have an option of adding no activity at all. Of course, we don't know what activity is right now, but we will understand all of that. Or we can add basic activity or empty activity. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to just go ahead and add an empty activity. Okay, so I'm going to say next. This is where we're going to add a name for our application. So I'm just going to go ahead and say show name now, something like that. Okay. You notice also we have a package name here. So the package name is very important because that is the ID of your application. Again, we'll talk more about that later. Okay. So this is where we can save our project. So you can change to where you want to save your project. Right. So if you click here, then it will take you to other places where you can add where you want this project to live. So it doesn't matter where, as long as the place where you would know. And for languages here, we have options of Kotlin and Java. So in this course, we are going to be using Java. So obviously, we're going to say Java. Now, the minimum API level here, we will talk more about that at a later time. But for now, we want to make sure that this simple app runs on more than 95% of devices. Okay, so just click on API 19. So you can click here and get any API you want. Again, I don't expect you to know what this API really is, but it's just levels of different versions of Android at this moment. So we're going to go with KitKat 19. That's totally fine. And we're going to say finish. And in a few seconds, we have this beauty showing off here. Okay, so there's a lot of things going on, but we are going just to focus on one thing, which is to get things running and get our first application working. So this is the boilerplate app. Okay, so we have this XML activity here where we can use to create our user interface. And we have the actual Java file, so the entry point, if you will. Now, as it is right now, we can actually go ahead and run. So if I click here, assuming we were able to create our emulator previously, we can just go ahead and click here. So in your case, you probably won't have all of this. You probably just have available virtual devices, only one, because that's what you may have created already previously, right? So for me, I have a few, as you can see, and I also have already one connected. So I'm going to choose the one that's connected there and say, okay. And as you can see here, it was hiding. This is the connected device that I have. So if you don't have one, of course, you choose from the devices that are available. And in a second, it all runs and you can see it says hello world there. Very good. So where is this coming from? Well, this is actually coming from our activity main XML. As you can see, there is this hello world, which is really small, and we can make it bigger as that. We can also go ahead and close that part down there so we have more space, and you can see this is hello world. Now we have two panes here and we'll discuss more all of that, but for now you can see there's hello world. If you click on that, there's a lot of attribute and so forth. So very good. So this is what's happening here. That's why you see this here, right? Very good. So nothing out of this world. Nevertheless, this is your first hello world Android app. Now let's change things a little bit here so that we can actually customize this app to our liking. I'm going to come back here, make this a little bit smaller. And for now, we are going to delete this. So if you click and delete, right, it's all now gone. Okay, so now it's all empty. And what we're going to do is we are going to add a button in the middle. Now, where do we find a button? Well, a button, you can see here, we have this palette. There's different options, buttons, widgets, and so forth. Let's go to buttons. There is our button. You can drag it over, right? Keep dragging. And you can see there are all those lines that are aligning things around. So it tells us there would be in the middle of the screen, right? Because it is in the middle, as you see, all those dashed lines. If you let it go, all of a sudden you see you have those buttons. In fact, I should say that button, because there's just only one button. Okay, so this is actually to the right here is mimicking whatever we're doing to the left. Very good. And of course, we still have our attributes there. No problem. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to constrain this button, meaning I want to make sure that every time this button has a constraint to the top. The moment you do that, right? Let me get rid of that again. Put it back here so we can do this again. So if you click, you see it turns this color green, which means you can actually click and hold and then drag. You see that line there? If you go like that, it snaps to the top. That means now if you bring it down, it gives us that this is always going to be 348 units to the bottom like that. Okay, so we can play around with that. This is very important, as we will see at a later time, but this allows us to then make sure that every time, no matter what, this button is going to be about 248 units down from the top. Okay, so it's snapped there. Okay, and we'll do that to the left and that also to the right like that. Okay. Very good. So we have our button. If you double click this button here, notice that you see this happening. What that means is that it wants you to change the title of the button. I'm going to say here, show name. If I can spell correctly, of course, show name like that. Okay, there we go. So there is the button show name. But at this point, there are a lot of things we can do with this button in terms of attributes and so forth. But at this point, all we want to do is to make sure that this button is indeed in the middle. So if you click on it, you see all the constraints and everything. If you click away, you see there's nothing there. If you save this and give a quick run again, say okay, it'll take a few seconds. And you can see there is our show button. Now, because it's all given, we just added a button. Notice the beauty here, because if you click on that, it actually has that ripple effect. Very good. All right, so let's continue to move here. So what I'm going to do next is add a text here, because the idea here is to make sure that when we tap on this button, we want to show some sort of text here. Okay, so how do we add a text? Well, we come here to our palette, right? Click there. There is text. What do we want? We just a text view. So I'm going to put right below there. Okay, let it go. And now I want to make sure that this text view is always below our show name button. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before and snap it there. But now it's too close. So I'm going to just move it a little bit down there to my liking, and that looks good. Now I could also do the same, add the right constraint and as well as the left constraint as that. Okay, if you save this, and notice we also have this icon at the top here. So what this is, it means, okay, if we are doing our development here and we don't constantly have to rerun everything, because that means we'll have to compile our code every time we do so. So if you say like this, in fact, let me move this a little bit to the right. If you hover over here, it says apply changes. If you click, all of a sudden it goes and shows the text view there because it applied the changes right away without having to recompile everything. Okay, so it's very handy. So we have it all checked out here. Now let's go back to show name here. You notice to the attributes, we have this thing called ID. Well, it turns out everything in our Android here has to have an ID. So this has an ID and this also has an ID. Okay, because this is the visual representation of our application. Now, the reason why we need these IDs is because we need to call those in our main activity.java, which we haven't looked at yet. We will in a second here. Now, because we just added them, they usually give us IDs as such. So it just says button. So we can change those IDs if you want, which we will later, obviously. Okay, but at this point, I'll just let it be like that. So this is ID button for this button, and for this text view here is going to be text view as such. All right, and we can actually change the text that it shows here, because right now you see it says text view, and most times we don't want it to say anything, or we just want to be empty like that, but it's still there, right? Very good. So if you want to add something there, you could. But at this point, we just want to leave it as it is because we want to make sure when we run our application, we're not going to see anything there. Only when we say show name, then we'll be able to see whatever the text view has. Okay, so we are pretty much done with our user interface for now at least. So let's go back to our main activity here. This is where the fun begins. So this is our entry point, our activity, if you will. Again, don't worry if none of this makes sense because the idea here is just to get us going and then we'll explain all this stuff at a later time, okay? All right, so let's go ahead here and fetch these IDs, or in this case, fetch these views, right? These controllers here, right? The button and also the text view, because we need to connect this user interface with our Java so that we are able to then write the logic which will allow us to click show name and show whatever we want in the text view. To get these, this is the reason why we have IDs. They must have IDs, because that's the only way we're going to be able to get them from our main activity. So at the top here of this class here, inside here, okay, make sure it's inside here. I'm going to say private, and I'm going to say button, because this is indeed a button type, right? So we're going to append this button there. And notice we have an issue right away. That means, well, it's a widget, so we need to install it. So if you click here and click in this, say import, and voila, we'll have that import. Nothing is showing there because it's all hidden. No problem. Okay, so now we're going to say, give it a name. I'm going to say my button, like that. I'm going to do the same thing with my text view, right? Because we need to pass the type of the things that we want to call from our user interface. Okay, it's my text view. I'm just going to say here, show name. Oops. I'm going to say here, show text, like that. Very good. Now we have a reference to button and show text object types, right? Button and text. Not necessarily to actually these guys here yet. We do that, meaning connecting to these IDs, next. To do that, well, we go into our own create, because this is where everything happens. Right below here, I'm going to go ahead and say my button, and I'm going to find it. I'm going to say find view by ID. Ah, wonderful. So here I'm going to say r.id.button. So what are we doing now? We've created at the top here my button reference, if you will, right? And now here, what are we saying is we are getting the reference to our ID button, which we created here. This ID here, which is button, to say, okay, let's go now and get the handle of this show name here so we can actually do things to it. That's what we're doing here. We're going to do the same thing to our show text. Find by ID, r.id.show text, or did I say text view? We didn't change anything, did we? So these IDs have to be obviously exactly the same. Let's click here, there. You can see the ID is text view. Okay, so it has to be exactly the same. Very good. So now we have those two. At this point here, I can show you that we indeed have this show text, which is this text view here, right? We can actually handle it inside our main Java activity. Look at this. I can go ahead and say show text dot access something, and I can set a text to that show text, which is a text view, as you can see there, right? And inside here, I can pass something like, hello, I am here, like that. If I save this and do a quick, I should be able to see, hello, I'm here. All right, very good. Of course, this is not what we intend. What we intend to do is to make sure that when my button is clicked, we then change this show text to whatever we want to change to. All right, but at least I showed you that now show text, which is exactly this text view that we added here, we can access it indeed inside of our main activity. And we can set the text to whatever we want. That's why we're able to see this. Hello, I'm here. All right, so in the next video, what we're going to do is we're going to wire up our show name so that when they click, we're going to show some sort of text here. Very nice. I'll see you next.